man Bryant West of the Kings Herald steps in. Of course, he was with us yesterday, back with us today to talk about the kick. Let's try to go positive here, Bryant. Let me frame this in a positive way. Tell us why Keegan Murray will work out for the Sacramento Kings.
Keegan Murray's a great player. Like, for everything that got talked about yesterday between Jaden Ivey and Keegan Murray, there's no doubt in my mind. Keegan Murray there's reasons we've been talking about him for the last 4 months as a legitimate target for the Kings. He fits this roster very well. He's an excellent shooter. He's a promising all-around offensive player. He's solid and versatile on defense. He plays with consistency and composure that, most young guys lack, especially those in Sacramento. He's going to be a fan favorite from day one. And even if I'm a little hesitant to figure out how he's going to create his own offense, he's just going to make this team better on both ends of the court. I certainly understand fans preferring Jaden Ivey and being disappointed that he wasn't selection, but I'm really optimistic about Murray as a strong player for the Kings for a long time.
One thing that a lot of people talk about is his shooting and what he's able to do offensively, but I think not often enough do people talk about his defensive ability. There's things ability-wise that I think he can improve on, but I look at the way he understands defense and understands the game and his ability to be a team defender, and I look at that as a huge positive. Is that some of the things that you saw when you looked at Murray a little more in-depthly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to stress this again. For a guy who was the leading scorer in Iowa, like 23.5 points per game, was pretty much the only guy who went out there and could consistently create his own shot. It's incredibly impressive how dedicated and successful he was on defense. I mean, you just don't see that kind of two-way from young guys anymore in college. 1.9 blocks and 1.3 steals. That's really good. He is a good help defender. He's a very aware team defender, like you said. And those are the kind of skills that you just can't underrate. He's going to come in and he's going to have a better understanding of what he can do on the defensive end, and he's going to fit into Mike Brown's system than Jaden Ivey or pretty much most of the guys that we were talking about in that range. I, like you guys, have some concerns about his transition here. I think that for all of the range that he showed in college, there were certainly moments where he handled perimeter players pretty well, but I do worry that he might be a step too slow for me to think that he's going to be a guy who can go onto the faster wings and forwards full time. But he's going to be a good defender at his position and offer some switchability at the next level. I'm sure Mike Brown loves this pick in terms of, hey, I've got somebody in here who's a young guy, but he knows what he's doing on defense. And I don't think he's going to change the game for the Kings defense. He's not going to fix this awful defense overnight, but he's a good step in the right direction.
There was a rumor floating around on social media. I don't think we brought it to the air last night because we couldn't get it confirmed by a couple of different people, but that the Kings were in fact trying to get back in the first round, and there was a specific player that they were aiming for. I think the player, I think the player was Tari Eason.
Oh God, that's what I heard too, and just I so
they were
wish
enamored by the suit. To be honest with you, I think it was the suit that he was wearing, and they were like,
"We got to looking smooth last night."
Yeah. But he wasn't available. I think one of the people who tweeted that was Matt George. Matt will be. He didn't tweet about Tari. He tweeted about the Kings trying to get back in. We'll talk to him about that. Of course, James Ham will be with us as well. But we've gotten a couple of notes about them trying to get back into the draft, and it sounds like Eason might have been the guy that we're going for.
Yeah, and if that's true, I absolutely love it. I would have loved that Campbell for Sacramento. He's been one of my favorite prospects to watch this year. He's going to really help that Houston team. He's a promising two-way force, one of the best defenders in the class, aside from Chad. He was probably my favorite defender to watch. And I honestly feel like he would have been a great fit next to Keegan, that same kind of good instinct, but a little bit more flexibility and could guard down the lineup, I think, a little bit better than Keegan. But man, if they jumped back in there and got him too, I would have just been celebrating today, because that would have just been adding two really smart players who, have good upside on the offensive end as well.
So they got Keegan Murray, good pickup, good draft pick. Like everybody else, I think he's going to help out this team. What's next in your mind to improve this roster? What's the next move? What should they be targeting? How should they go about getting it?
Well, I'm not sure what the next move is, but I know that it has to come. Like, my frustration last night was the same as you guys. It came from the lack of any other meaningful move, especially since the rest of the West, just got better and better around them. Dallas got Christian Wood. Portland added Jeremy Grant and got Shaden Sharp. Houston added 2 of my favorite players in the draft. OKC added like 5 young guys. Nobody in the West took a step back yesterday. And I can't even really think of a team that like stood still. The Kings added Keegan Murray. He's a good player, but like, what else did they do? Like, adding him and Mike Brown isn't suddenly going to get this team into the play-in. And when the West just keeps improving, the Kings aren't a team that can just sit back and add any one rookie and then just chill out and find how things do unfold. I know that they have a lot of expirings for next year. If Rashawn Holmes isn't in this team's future plans, he's got a good contract, and I think he could help out a lot of smart teams. I would not hesitate to include a protected pick in the future if it meant bringing back a real good player. Heck, maybe even Davion Mitchell if the price is right. But Kings can't just sit around. They're not going to be the team that they want to without some significant moves from here on out.
And what are those moves, man? I think that's where I think that's the road where we all keep traveling down. It's a question we're going to ask a lot today when Matt joins us later. We just talked about it with Deuce and Mo, James later. Kyle Matson's got Kings draft takes. He's ready to fire off. He's got plans for the Kings as well. How do you do it now? If the 4th pick was in fact your best asset to get multiple pieces back, and you believe Keegan Murray is the guy who's going to have that immediate impact to get better, well, what do you do now?
Yeah, and I don't have any good answers for that, because I think, like Kenny, the best time to have made that move was yesterday. And there is, I'm somewhat annoyed by how passive Monty McNair has been for so much of his career, aside from that one big Hallie for Sabonis trade. It feels like every time he steps up to the plate, they make a move, but they never are as aggressive as I think the Sacramento Kings need to be if they're ever going to get out of this slump. And I heard what Mo said last segment. It absolutely takes 2 to tango, which is, I think, a really fair statement. I think a lot of the times on social media, and especially on Twitter, we think, well, if we're talking about it on Twitter, it absolutely is something that's getting discussed in NBA GM circles, and that's just not true. We have no idea what the Kings talked about yesterday. We have no idea what Monty McNair's plans are. The problem is that at the end of the day, if those moves never happen, like, this team just doesn't get better. This team can't just take one step at a time and think one of these years we're going to see internal improvement that gets us somewhere. So, my focus has always been on the draft. That's how I've always focused on the Kings, on how the Kings can improve. But, the 4th pick yesterday was their best offseason asset. So unless they're really going to go hog wild with the unprotected picks and Davion Mitchell, I struggle to see how they're going to make that big improvement. I'll back Deuce up, though. If you can get OG Anunoby for whatever price Toronto wants, go get that. That's the big step forward in my mind.
Yeah,
I don't know that it's happening, but
OG's not getting traded. They're not getting OG. That's not happening. Yeah. Like that. Number one, they don't have enough. Like, if OG was really out there, they get blown away by somebody else's offer.
Probably.
That's the conundrum. But I do look at this roster, and I'm trying to figure out a way to say, hey, this roster that they have some good pieces, and it's not that hard for me, because, like I said, I've said it numerous times, I think the roster is better than people give it credit for. But let's just go for the guard position. You got your 4 guards of Fox, probably DiVincenzo starting. Davion, and Terrence Davis. I really like the idea of Terrence Davis getting an opportunity to play with Mike Brown. I want to see what he can do on both sides of the court with a coach like Mike Brown. Do you think maybe they're done at the guard position, or do you see them needing something else other than what they already have?
Well, I'll back you up from last night. I would have loved to see them grabbed Hardy in the second round just to add one more spark plug off the bench at that position.
Brian, I'm trying to be positive. Don't bring me on the road.
No, they got it. It's a fair thing to look at this team and think, with an actual NBA head coach, Mike Brown's going to improve this roster from within. This is a good guard lineup. It's always been a good guard lineup. We have no problems there. Terrence Davis, DiVincenzo, Mitchell, Fox, they all they have a real put up or shut up moment here. Mike Brown's going to make them work in a way that I don't think they have. And that goes throughout the whole lineup. The big men too. Richaun Holmes, Sabonis, Jones, if he comes back, this team has the pieces. It just, I'm struggling to be as optimistic as you are here, Kenny.
Taking a positive approach. I'm trying to find the positivity, and I think there are positive things to talk about with this franchise. Yesterday was just pretty underwhelming. I think that's the thing that's going on. But you move on from it. You figure out what you got, and like I mentioned at the guard spot, I kind of like those guys.
Well,
I mean, some people see pie in the sky.
There's a lesson to be learned in this, though, with what you just said. And the great Public Enemy said it back in the 80s.
Fight the power.
Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. Like, we get wrapped up in this fantasy world of trade picks, and I'll say it again: the trade machine has made the world dumber. And we think that because the little machine says it's okay, that it's going to work. Well, that's not how this works. This who says no world that we live in isn't reality. And, we talk about these John Collinses, and we talk about these Kyle Kuzmas and these Julius Randles and these OG Ananobis and all of these different, it's like, yeah, there's a reality to it, but what's the real, what is each team looking for? You listen to D'Lo and KC on KIFM West Sacramento, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, and Odyssey Station, and driven by Lashers, Elk Grove Dodge. Bryant West, draft expert, draft analyst over at the Kings Herald with us. And I think that's what this boils down to. We allowed ourselves to get wrapped up in the fantasy. We didn't do this last year. We talked about the pick being traded, but we didn't look at that as like a franchise-altering pick. We didn't do it with Tyrese Halliburton either. It was because this was we thought, we found the end of the rainbow. We got this pot of gold here, and we're going to dole it all out and get back all the goods. And that's not reality.
Real quick, Ryan, I want to say something to that, though, is it can't be all hype. It can't be all hype for two reasons. Number one, it's got to be coming from someplace. And number two, if I'm Monty McNair, I'm going to make sure it's not all hype. I'm making actual phone calls and saying, hey, what would it take to get this and that? This and like, it can't be all hype. It can't be nobody's doing anything. Nobody's making phone calls. Because if that's the case with Monty McNair, that's a problem. Like, the phone calls got to be real. The discussions got to be real to see what you can do to improve this team.
I don't disagree with that. I just think sometimes we frame this stuff as if it's super easy. Like, other teams aren't calling about John Collins, or other teams that have better relationships with certain general managers or certain front offices, or, stop me if you've heard this before, certain agents. Maybe that creates easier transactions like this. It's just not as simple as throwing names in and goes, well, the money works. Why isn't this done?
Yeah. I think all of this is just another good lesson that it's really easy to be an armchair GM, but it doesn't always translate to how they actually do it in the NBA circles. But if I could get us back to a positive framing here.
There you go, Bryant. Good job, buddy.
I wanted Jaden Ivey. Everybody knows that. There is a real possibility that when we look in a few years, we're just like, why did we ever doubt Keegan Murray? Because I always come back to this. If you're looking at a smart player with good instincts on both ends of the court, who's clearly putting in the work, who has clearly shown big development in the past, like, why are we putting any cap on his ceiling? And I'm not going to go out there and bet, oh, Keegan Murray's ever going to lead a team in scoring. I look at his tape. I don't see that in his future. But there is, to me, his swing skill has always been his ability to pull up off the dribble. He is a great shooter off the catch. He's a great shooter when he's set. He's not as proven a shooter off of the dribble. Only had like 41 attempts last year. And if you looked at just his highlights, they were everywhere in his highlights. So it's definitely like well, I see it here. It's got to be real, right? Well, Keegan Murray comes out there and he's suddenly a lot more fluid with it. He's using it a lot more. There's no reason to think that can't be his creation ability. And if that comes around, suddenly we are talking about Fox, Keegan Murray, Sabonis, all three guys who can figure out how to score at a good level. Keegan Murray is suddenly a very, very good shooter. I mean, he's already a good shooter. If he's suddenly pulling off the dribble at the same rate that he's doing it off the catch, like, he's a good fit here in Sacramento. So I don't quite understand the pessimism that I've seen on Kings Twitter about Keegan Murray. I understand it about where the Kings are as a whole, not about Keegan Murray.
Nah, I like Keegan Murray as a ball player, man. I think he's going to do a good job with the Kings. Any issues that I have really have nothing to do with Keegan Murray, because I think he's going to do his job. He's going to be a good ball player. He's going to be a good puzzle piece to what they're trying to do. I wanted to ask you about there was no second round guys, but the undrafted guys, specifically Ellis out of Alabama, right? You went to Alabama?
Yeah. Yeah, he did.
I saw him just a couple times. I didn't know he'd be here. I didn't dive deep into his game, but I remember watching him when they played Gonzaga up in Seattle, and some of the things he was able to do out there really stood out to me. So that name rang a bell. I thought that was a good get as an undrafted free agent. Do you familiar with him or Horn, the guy out of Tulsa?
Yeah, I think Keon Ellis was a great second round get. I know that there were a lot of smart analysts and a lot of smart Kings fans who were really hoping they'd get him in the second round. So, hey, getting him on a two-way deal, that's excellent. He is the kind of guy that they should have gone out and grabbed with that two-way deal. Like you said, strong perimeter defender, was named to the SEC all defensive team this season. Good size and length for the position, good quickness, and, a promising shooter in his own right. Shot like 46% from the field and 37% from deep last year. And I looked it up this morning. He shot 60% at the rim in the half court. So he's kind of a three-way guy. He's got to get bigger. Like, somehow he is skinnier than I am and has like 6 inches of height on me. That's just absolutely absurd for an NBA player. But I fully expect that come Summer League, he's going to turn a lot of heads in Sacramento with just how dedicated he is on defense. So, and I watched none of Tulsa last year. I'm not even going to fake it. So I have no idea who Horn is.
What do you think happens with it? Do you think Davion has a more definitive role with this team next year?
I sure hope so.
Kind of lost, and it I mean, it seems simple. Like, some people are talking about a starting two guard. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but a clearly defined role is De'Aaron Fox's backup, where his minutes in his role are very consistent. Seems like elementary work for Mike Brown, especially the way that he was raving about him, and Davion, of course, getting the teacher's pet award, as many people were saying, sitting in the front row, looking up like he was the honor student in the class, and well, I think that's something everybody loved, because most of us are a fan of Davion Mitchell. But that's one of the things, Bryant, that I frame as a really important aspect of what Mike Brown has to do this offseason leading into the regular season is, what do we got Keegan Murray, like, that's cool. What are we going to do with last year's first round draft pick to get the most out of him?
Yeah, whether it's starting or coming off the bench, I really hope that he's going to get a ton of minutes this year. And I'm sure Mike Brown, is there a more Mike Brown player on this roster? Like, he one of the biggest defenders on the Warriors last year was Gary Payton Jr. You think Mike Brown doesn't have a whole bunch of that playbook that can be ready for Mitchell this year? And he's got to continue to show improvement in his shot, especially off the catch, if he's going to play with the starting lineup. But it's the same kind of thing I just said with Keegan. Don't underestimate smart, high motor players figuring out the best they can be. And he's a big part of the Kings' future. So I am expecting good things from him next year, and I'm really excited to see what Mike Brown can do with him.
Hey, we were trying to figure this out yesterday. You think Davion plays in summer league at all?
If it was most other second year guys, I might hesitate more. But like, it's Davion Mitchell. You think he doesn't want to be out there? You think he doesn't want to go out there and try to win another?
Doesn't get to play.
Yeah, and the team might have something to say about it, but I'd love for him to go out there and develop some chemistry early with Keegan Murray. He and Keon Ellis are just going to bond immediately. Go out there and thrive in the summer league. Go get us another summer league title. That's our playoffs in Sacramento.
I guess I missed this part of the interview. Shout out to Deuce and Mo. Shout out to Marcus saying, I guess David said in the conversation they had with Deuce and Mo a couple of weeks back that he's not playing.
He don't really need to play anyway.
He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to. That wasn't the question. The question was, does Davion kind of push his way to get to play in Las Vegas? Or I would bet if the California Classic was where it was supposed to be, I bet Davion would be out there for at least a game. Just like I'm gonna get a workout in with these guys. Has when does Bryant West 2023 big board?
November at the earliest. I'm gonna go.
You're I thought it was gonna be like 5 o'clock tonight.
Oh heck no! I am no high school tape dude. I do not go watch these guys until they're either playing in the G League or playing in college. I'm not about that AAU life.
And you got the high school tapes and the AAU tournaments.
I got my eye on these guys.
Kenny had to do a lot more high school tape than I probably did this year, being the Shaden Sharp expert. So I fully admit just watching that was like nails on a chalkboard, going back to just how college basketball is played and taped. So, I am looking forward to 2023 tape. There are apparently a lot of guys who are going to be good players for a long time, but I'm like you guys. I'm not excited about the Kings being in the lottery until they start showing me, okay, well, they need to be in the lottery. So I'll go into next year hoping for the play, and then, ask me in January, see how I'm feeling.
All right. We'll ask you in January, hopefully before then. Great work this week, Bryant. Great work throughout this process over the last month and some change. Since the Sacramento Kings moved up in the draft. Your coverage would have been phenomenal if they were drafting at 7 or 8, but it heightened a little bit with the Kings drafting at 4. So it's been fun this last month, man. Great work.
No, I appreciate you guys. And if anybody hasn't read it, I have a full profile on Keegan Murray on the Kings Herald, and you can find me on Twitter at BSWest5. But I'll be back on with you guys whenever you want me to.